Good afternoon to all those watching this episode. This is of our DWB podcast. This is episode 5, if you can believe that. We're 5 episodes in and covering a multitude of different topics. And this one, a catchy one, Hope Through Failure. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I just want to give a chance to introduce ourselves. My name is Roberto. I'm the DWB co-coordinator alongside Fernando, also advisor for EMBD, and we have some of our awesome executive board members here, student executive board members here. So if you want to start us off, I'm just going to go off of my screen. So Erika, if you want to go first.
My name is Erica Andrade. I'm a junior in EMBD, and I'm also the graphic designer marketer for 2 organizations here at EMBD, which is DWB and AIS.
Cool. Itai.
Hi, everyone. I am Itai Bugarin. I'm a second year here at Environmental Design. I'm majoring in architecture, and I am an EMVD ambassador, and I'm the event planner for DWB.
Look at you. Yeah, thanks for joining our team. Itai is our awesome new event planner. Got some cool stuff in the works. And finally, we have Narda.
Everyone, I'm Narda. I'm a 4th year at EMVD studying architecture, and I am the secretary for DWB.
Yeah, gotta say some pride, because you are what makes DWB run. Without notes, without all that, where would we be? Anyways, so just a quick overview. The podcast series was started for a need for kind of a remote learning environment for our scholarship program. What we're really seeing is that it's become a space to talk about critical issues and share that out. So if you're not if you're not active participant, you can at least watch it on our YouTube channel. And it looks like Victor's going to join us. Awesome. He just jumped on the call. And each episode is kind of dedicated to a different topic pertaining to diversity, equity, inequity, oppression, is related to the design industry, and particularly the experience of underrepresented students. And this one is particularly for a lot of us, it's going to hit home in that we're really talking about the social, cultural differences and nuances of failure and rejection, and specifically, what does that mean for first generation students and for all other underrepresented students. So the catchphrase for this episode is essentially, failure and rejection are part of a learning and growing process. However, what does it mean when some can fail more so than others? And that's pretty much the premise of this, is talking about the dynamics of what failure means, the weight, the burden of it sometimes, and have just an honest dialogue around that topic, which for a lot of times it's the elephant in the room, or something we stray away from, that we try to hyper perform while trying to feel like we're enough, when we're actually a lot more than our peers, or we have high standards, and we are high excelling students, but don't feel that way. Victor, you joined the call. Do you want to do a quick introduction and your role on the executive board?
Yeah, sure. So this is my 3rd introduction I've done today. But hello, everybody listening. My name is Victor Gonzalez. I'm currently a senior in the program of environmental design, also emphasizing architecture. This year, it is my 2nd year returning as executive chair for Designers Without Boundaries. And I'm also currently the vice president for our AIS chapter here at TU.
Thanks, Victor. All right. So once again, going into the conversation, is really looking at the take on what failure means. A lot of folks attribute failure as part of, a culture shock process, or the process of acclimating or not acclimating to higher education institutions. In a lot of ways, historically, we're not made for first generation or students of color or folks of low income backgrounds, LGBTQIA students, et cetera, or non-gender conforming students, et cetera. And in a lot of ways you feel out of place, and something that we often keep as a personal issue, or when we talk about failure, it's an individual experience. But as we understand is that it's not exactly falls on the individual. A lot of times there's family, community, and entire culture that kind of informs a sense of wrongdoing by failing and avoiding failure at whatever cost possible. Whereas for some, failure is just another day at the office. It's another a step of growth. So with that being said, there's some important concepts that we've kind of come up together as a board in planning this podcast that we just want to have a bit of a dialogue on before we actually get into discussion. So we cover all our bases covered. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and go over them. So I will first, actually, it seems like we have, Erika did an overview. So Erika, if you mind, speaking a bit on the first generation families, kind of that concept, that take on, instead of just considering someone a first generation student by themselves.
Interesting. So the first generation students, I think, run into a lot of different issues, and one of them is that often we feel that we're not just doing this for ourselves. We're not pursuing an education just for ourselves. A lot of the times we include our families, mentors in this kind of thing. And therefore the fear of failing becomes 10 times worse because, it's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect, perhaps your parents that are looking up to you, your younger siblings that are looking up to you. And it's kind of an overwhelming sense at times. Of course, the rewards could be, much bigger if you continue striving, but, it kind of just adds a lot of often anxiety and thoughts that other people who don't experience or who are not first generation students experience that. And, that's just important to keep in mind.
Thank you, Erika. I think that captured it perfectly. And we'll dive back into it as we go further along in the discussion. So another thing that Erika brought up is this fear of failure. So Itai, if you mind just describing some words on how that, envisions and plays out for you, or how you would define it.
So fear of failure, I feel like Erica, like she's put it, like she hit it right on the head, as in like it's just a lot more worse. It's a lot harder just because people have such high expectations for you, especially like your family, your siblings, your cousins, and like not even just them, like you have other people already like having such high expectations for you that like failing seems like it's not an option, and it's pretty scary, and it's always there, like in the background. It's always like in the back burner, everything you're doing.
Yeah. And then also kind of differentiate a bit with failure and then rejection.
I don't know. I can say this a lot personally. I'm afraid of rejection. It's just a lot. It's really hard for me when I get rejected. But I feel like it ties into that whole like fear of failing. I feel like whenever I fail or I get rejected, it's failure of some sort, when in reality it's not. And just like navigating and learning, as when you get into college especially, like it's the hardest part, is learning how to fail and getting back up and like having that resiliency of keep going at it.
Yeah. So you definitely brought up an important follow-up of what failure and rejection. And to clear up the air, there's not rejection of a potential boo or whatever. This is rejection in terms of universities, graduate school applications, a job, just the rejection of not having enough merit or the qualities possessed. And from like at the beginning, it's terrible, it's shocking, but over time, it happens. If it does happen consistently, you do build up resiliency, which I'm glad you brought up, because that's what comes out of it. And you're able to know where your skills fit the best. And it's not the matter if you have enough, it's where they fit best. And like I said, a lot of professional firms, employment, graduate school opportunities, they don't offer the same type of environment across the board. So having that type of rejection failure is part of identifying what's best for you. I think that's a great, another point that you brought up that isn't actually on this list. Thank you. And then kind of with that, those who can fail a bit more, Narda, would you mind sharing a bit how that plays into a privilege dynamic?
Yeah, so like everything that was just mentioned, I think failure is a privilege because it affects more than just one person. It affects your family, your community, and um, I think it's also like a luxury since we can't all afford to fail because of the implications that that failure may have for your future and for those that depend on you and look up to you.
In a lot of ways, failure can be literally expensive and too high of a cost. You know, you fail a class, some folks are like, okay, you know, pick yourself up, take the class again. But when you're on, you know, you're paying tuition, or you have the cost of books, or the cost of grad school applications over time, it can have a literal cost effects and literally play into privilege that you don't have enough resources to fail as others. Um, Not even minding, you know, the dynamic of the actual cultural and social costs for one's own individual self and their families and communities. So thanks for that, Narda. And that kind of plays into this kind of concept on the cultural differences on growth and learning. And I'll just share a bit from my background and my experience, not just purely academic, but I'll start with the academic. So usually it kind of boils down to this growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And in terms of the experience for underrepresented students, first generation students. So a fixed mindset, essentially, that's where a lot of underrepresented start off with, is that they're often sold and told this narrative that they have all of the qualifications, all of the standards in their own respective local community pocket, that they have all that they need, that they're going to do to succeed well at a predominantly white, predominantly affluent institution. And they get there, and you know, the bar has been raised, certainly, and the scope has been extended out. So that can have a detriment. So if students are, you know, very ingrained that they have all they've done and they've peaked and everything should be seamless, and if it isn't, they don't belong. That's what the fixed mindset essentially kind of sets the bar, that nothing can go above, with one's own kind of thought of themselves or their esteem of what they're capable of. Now, on the opposite end is growth mindset, and that's pretty much developing that you will experience a fixed mindset, but after that cultural shock, you'll essentially, you know, start growing by experiencing that failure, that rejection, and that's all part of the process. And that it's at every point of failure is a learning outcome. So that's what the academia says. Now, on a more personal note, culture shock in higher education, you know, you definitely feel first semester, first seminar that you might be in, being one of only few students of color, being one of few only, you know, students whose parents haven't been to college, you know, when you might hear your peer or this person you sit next to, or the person in your residence hall say, you know, my parents are doctors or they're professionals, that we're able to go on these. I was able to study abroad for a year in Europe in high school. You know, all these things kind of take a detriment on oneself. So that lack of representation and that first generation experience kind of does really, it can a lot of times really ingrain a fixed mindset, and building that growth mindset becomes a challenge. So representation is how you mitigate, or how you essentially expose folks to embrace a growth mindset. And another more important point is that kind of identifying that Latinx and other people, you know, or other communities of color are very much collective, family, and community oriented. You know, everyone kind of knows each other. Families are very well connected. You might have a cousin who you pretty much refer to as your brother, or extended cousin that's pretty much your aunt, or a parental role in a lot of ways, and that's shared. You know, you can have multiple parents, or you can have multiple, you know, community partners or people in your neighborhood that are pretty much are your family. Whereas the predominant culture is very much rooted in kind of an individualistic take, whereas you have to constantly compete. Everyone is kind of on their own terms, or on their own. You either make it or break it, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, and if you work hard enough, you can succeed, and more importantly, succeed more than others. You always, that comparison point is with that predominantly culture of individualism and competition. So a lot of those are at contrast. And, surprisingly, guess what takes over in higher education is definitely that predominant individualistic culture. So when you come from a collective and community, sorry, go ahead, Najika.
Can I add to it?
Or,
Like just like going back to like this lack of representation and culture shock, especially when you're coming from a place that you do come from like a predominantly like colored area. You come into this like new place where you barely see any people of like your like culture, and you start missing like your food, the food your mom makes, or just speaking Spanish overall. Like you lose that touch of your culture when you move out and you go to a different place that does not have like that, it lacks this representation. Not only that, but it also adds like onto that it adds weight onto like first generation and to the color students, like of like maybe you can't make it because like sometimes like even seeing one person that is of color make it makes you want to be able to do more, and it gives you that power of that, like that push is like, oh, like they did it, like I could definitely do it myself too, like I can do it, and so just there, like that lack of representation and that culture shock.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because one of the ways that you have representation and encourage students is role models, and then of course living role models who can act as mentors. That is a very powerful instrument, and you don't need any type of level of expertise to be a mentor. Oftentimes we have our upper division students, our upper division seniors and juniors here, who end up mentoring lower division students, so ITAI. And you can structure that, but oftentimes that happens organically by itself. So kind of where I ended off, thank you, Itai, for sharing that. I would just say that without a feeling, coming from a collective and a family community or oriented background, you're going to feel out of place, and you're going to feel a need to assimilate to this individualistic culture. Now, does it end up being fully assimilated? For some folks, that does feel the need to do that. Now, for a majority of folks, I would say it's a balance, that you have this predominant culture they have to exist in, and then you have your background that is really your backbone for those who want it. And some folks kind of then take that and talk about things as code switching, which we can get into if anything I want to share on that. But yeah, I think I'll get into this other part, kind of the cream of the crop narrative. So a fixed mindset does fall into what we call cream of the crop, in that folks in high performing students in high schools, and predominantly those high schools in low income areas, or quote unquote places that they like to frame as deficit, inner city, whatever you want to call it, rural even. They kind of sold this narrative that you are the best student that we've had. You're college ready. You're college bound. But that's not the case. College preparation is something important for everyone. And a lot of times when you end up sending these students with the mindset that they're ready, they end up having that culture shock when they go into a higher education institution, predominantly those who are 4-year and predominantly white institutions. So at the other end, you have folks who don't necessarily go into higher education at a 4-year predominantly white institution, private institution, public, what they would say public Ivy League schools, such as CU. There's some folks who don't do that. And at the same time, there's a stigma against folks who don't have a traditional path into higher education, which kind of leads into our next point. Erika, if you want to talk about higher education as a kind of cure-all, or perceived as a cure-all for students of underrepresented and low-income backgrounds.
Right. Yeah, basically what you said, and first generation students / people coming from lower income backgrounds, we're often pushed this narrative that if you go to college, you can get a degree and get a good paying job and thus be a white collar worker and everything is going to be okay. And it's pushed on a lot of people. It was pushed on me. And I can't help but, pointing out the elitism behind that idea that you need to go to an institution, four-year institution, to succeed, when in fact, you're often pushed that idea, but you're not even given the resources or honestly a warning of how difficult it's going to be. I think it's been established that college institutions originally were not made for people of color. And therefore, we struggle because of that, because we have to adapt. And when we're constantly pushed towards joining such and attending such, but we're not being told that, we're going to, how much of a challenge it's going to be, it makes it really difficult for us. And it also, it really sucks that there's just a stigma on not going to college or even going to community colleges, trade school. From personal experience, I had teachers who were like, no, you should go to a four-year institution. It's just better. And a lot of people would question, well, why? Why does that mean, why would that add less value to me if I decide not to do something the traditional way? Because at the end of the day, it's not a fix-all, despite what it's treated on. It's just kind of a band-aid for the moment. And then you get into college and you're like, oh, wow, this is not what I thought it'd be. I don't like, the whole I don't belong here, that kind of idea. And, it really sucks that since young ages, since we're very young, we're pushed on that,
Absolutely. So, when you talk about higher education accessibility, a lot of folks really focusing on let's get them to a university, and they get there, they're going to be okay, if they've made it, if they have all that they need. That's half the battle. The other half of the battle is retaining, or retention, is keeping the students on the campus. And that oftentimes for a lot of institutions, it's an elephant in the room that doesn't talked about. A lot of students after their first year, they transfer out, they go something that's more accessible, more looks more like, where they're coming from, consider that. But not to say, there's students who, do want to stay and get the education there. I think, that's valid that students want to go and want to be leaders in their families, or, have the inspiration of their parents' struggle and take it into a very unknown place and take their family name and their experience and the culture into that, very hegemonic white affluent space and make something. But at the same time, it requires a very honest conversation of what it takes and what the experiences are going to happen. And it's not all rainbows and sunshine once you land in your freshman dorm ready to move in. And it is fun. There's a lot of fun things, but there are also things that happen after the first week that you kind of just pick up on. First classes, first student organization you might get involved with. It's all very formative to your overall experience.
It's a filtering system for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we just had Fernando jump on the call. Fernando, you want to do a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Fernando Martinez. I'm one of the co-coordinators for DWB. I'm also an advisor in environmental design, primarily first and second year students. And I also work with recruitment events. So thanks for having me, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Fernando. It's funny, we were just talking about recruitment, how that's half of the battle. So the way it plays out for DWB, I would say Fernando's very much involved with recruiting students, developing a sense of a design identity with potential, high school students who want to come to EMBD. On the other hand, my role as an upper division advisor is then to really make sure you have what you need on your way out. So just know that DWB hopefully is more balanced in that way, whereas a lot of programs really focus on that first year experience or getting you into higher education and not having you properly prepared to continue those 3 or 4 years to get your bachelor's or your undergraduate degree.
Yeah, it's made very intentional so that I would be DWB student advisor in the first 2 years, and I'm also coordinating DWB, and then they would then move over to Roberto's roster, who is the third and fourth year upper division advisor. So all points along the way, students will have an advisor that is dedicated to making sure that the students are being supported and that they find community within CU.
Awesome. And not to put you on the spot, Fernanda, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you mind sharing a bit of how you interpret or define an imposter syndrome?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, what is imposter syndrome? So just by definition, it's this feeling of just experiencing that you might be a fraud. It's psychological. It leaves you with like feelings of doubt of all your accomplishments, talents, etc. Of just your biggest fears being exposed as quote unquote a fraud in an environment where you might perceive that you don't belong, especially with lack of representation that exists at predominantly white institutions like CU Boulder. And that's something that we do see with our first generation and underrepresented students in terms of where they come from, being potentially a little bit more diverse, like their high schools being a little bit more diverse. And then coming into CU being a predominantly white institution, the culture is a little different. People's values change a little bit. So we kind of discussed this in a previous meeting. If you're a person of color or you're a first generation student, you might have been really on top of your class in high school, but then you enter, a university like Boulder, where there's not a lot of people that look like you, think like you, act like you, share that culture like you do, or just come from that background of a similar culture that you come from. And you might find yourself having these, thoughts or feelings around fraud or doubt, like maybe you don't belong. That's essentially like the definition of what imposter syndrome can look like. And that's a lot of the kind of topics and things that we like to talk about with our students, is that CU is definitely a place for you. And if you do happen to find yourself going through like this imposter syndrome, to reach out, connect, find your community, because oftentimes it could be a result of a lack of a community.
Absolutely, Fernanda. Thanks for that. And I just want to add my personal take on imposter syndrome is that at least when it comes to like the academia, it's largely framed as an individual experience. So you are the imposter. Whereas I feel like imposter syndrome is largely something that's also felt by a family and community. So, if you bring someone, bring pre-COVID times, you would bring your family to a graduation ceremony, or you do like a pre-collegiate camp. You bring them on, you bring your family to maybe the C4C, a dining hall during the regular school year. That can be a largely imposter syndrome for, entire family, or your siblings who might, come and join you every once and then, or visit you or help you even move in. That can be an imposter syndrome felt by an entire community or family. I think the other point in that it's not an individual experience is that what kind of mitigates imposter syndrome is having a community to support behind you, even though that community may not be, college educated PhD holders. It could be a place of folks can still understand that. I think families can still understand that the struggles you're going through, the sense of a lack of belonging, that you belong. I think a lot of folks, they don't need that expertise to tell you that you do belong. And I think a lot of students get caught up that, my parents don't have that expertise, so they don't know, how to best support me. But in a lot of ways they do, by knowing what's most culturally relevant to what you need. In a lot of ways, one of the things, share personal experience, like my mom, she would drive up from Aurora to come visit me in Boulder, and she would bring me, like a little caldo, a soup, and that's something that would just inspire me. I belong. I need to finish this degree. I need to hustle and get things done. That's not quote unquote, the similar to perhaps a professor telling me at the same time, you belong and you do that. Well, that's important. It also has the same value as that gesture that my mom did, in my mind. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because we kind of went over those concepts. But in short, just for, I think Shaheen joined us as well as Fernando, we covered kind of experiences of first generation families instead of just being a first generation student, fear of failure, fear of rejection, the privilege to fail, cultural differences around growth and learning. We have a cream of the crop narrative for underrepresented students, and kind of the push of that a 4-year traditional higher education route is the fix all to for the cycle of poverty, and how that, you know, other students, underrepresented students in technical schools or in community colleges push against that narrative. Just in short.
I would add to at, like, you know, whether you're a freshman, you know, or like a sophomore, junior, whatever, at CU, and you find yourself kind of second guessing yourself if this is the right school, if this is the right environment for you. Something that, you know, I wanted to point out is that all of the 7 colleges / programs at CU, so business, engineering, education, ENVD, you know, etc., we all have a program like DWB, so Designers Without Boundaries. So if you're watching us from CMCI and you're wondering, you know, where can I find my community, definitely reach out to your program, because we all kind of belong to this bigger CU Lead Alliance initiative at CU Boulder. And we all have a program like Designers Without Boundaries. And like pretty much the core of all of these programs is to work and serve and build community with all the underrepresented first gen / ally students that might be on campus. So definitely reach out to us or your program.
Gotcha. Thank you, Fernando. Shaheen, you're on the call. Would you mind introducing yourself? You grace us with your presence.
Yeah. Hi, Shaheen Rudbari. I teach in ENVD. I've had the pleasure of being in classes or doing research with most folks on this call. The kind of stuff I study is political engagement around social problems by designers. So yeah, range of classes from freshman up through senior, and research projects kind of ongoing.
Awesome. Thank you, Shaheen.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So kind of before we get into the actual conversation, a bit of experience sharing, which I will not, because I felt like I've taken up a lot of airwave here. So I want to kind of converse a bit on kind of how we move the narrative from an individual experience in higher education for underrepresented students. Kind of we have the narrative of that these struggles, the adversities and the successes are experienced at an individual level. Whereas for those students, you need to switch that narrative to a familial and community experience. You know, like I said before, people think that, you know, a student is dropped off in their dorms day one, and it's an individual's experience from there on out. You know, they're on their own to figure it out, to solve it, and if not, you know, boo-hoo, you know, go home or switch to another institution. However, you know, in that whole process, getting them into higher education, there was a whole family and community of educators, or of, you know, coaches, of pastors, of folks of various kind of supportive backgrounds helping them. And that doesn't stop when someone, you know, perhaps the contact time with the person is less, but in a lot of ways, that community support and family support doesn't stop. Instead, I would suppose that it rather evolves and adapts. And that kind of gets hidden in that narrative. So if anyone has any words to say, or, you know, experiences with that, that'd be great. But otherwise, that's, I think, important to know as we get into the conversation about how we've experienced the different concepts we just talked about. All good? Awesome. So now I'm going to kind of put out to the rest of the participants on the call, and I'm sharing my screen again. So we could just take a moment to about a couple of us to 3 or 4 of us to kind of share experiences on concepts that we discussed, and any type of experience. So I kind of shared, you know, my parent coming up to CU Boulder to drop off some stuff, and how in my mind, I perceive that as just as much as a faculty member of color also telling me that I belong and that I should pursue graduate school. It's on the same, deserves the same type of merit. I shared that experience. So any other concept that you mentioned, but I also have a couple prompting questions that I have below. So first one being is going into higher education. Can you recall a moment where you perceived a personal failure? And in that personal failure, did that then extend a sense of letting down your family or community? And at the same time, you can also switch that up to a success, individual success, and how you would then reclaim that as a success for your family and your community. And what ways has your degree or your degree aspirations represented a commitment to your family and community back home? And has your family/community been critical and or supportive of your failure experiences within higher education? So, not all at once.
Like, I can go if you guys want. So at least my parents don't really know anything about college. Like, I've always done all the work on my own, whether it came to like searching up colleges, searching up degrees, searching up everything. And so I don't necessarily have like my family backing me up, but without like them actually knowing at least. But I always go home every weekend to just bug my mother and eat her food and listen to them speak in Spanish to me and like reconnect with my family the way that I can't do so here like at CU just because, oh sorry, there's like a plane coming by. But I can't, like I don't have that like at CU, that like cultural, like, I don't know, that need that I need, I guess. And so I usually just go home and bug them a little bit and like help them out with their paperwork if they do. Like, that's just a way that I like reset my battery, I guess, to come back to CU and to do like this hard, like this work of really like keep going through like college, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Like, I think that's so like important and so valuable. All the like skills that you've like gained by like you taking on those initiatives and like you learning and researching and kind of advocating for yourself. I was in the very same exact position that you were when I was going into college. My parents didn't know anything about college either, and so I had to do everything on my own. And I just think that I just compare that experience to like the experiences of like some of the traditional like students that are not first generation, where like their parents are doing a lot of that work for them. And I just kind of compare that experience to like the experience that like you and I had, where like we kind of have to take it on ourselves. And like I feel like that is teaching so many valuable skills that are gonna just really benefit us later on. And that also makes me just think of that idea of like privilege, like how much privilege are those students already at, having like that support system where their parents can do the work for them versus like students like us, like we've had to like do it ourselves.
Yeah, and just like looking up, making like having that resiliency to keep looking for communities. It's so hard, especially at CU, to find like, especially if you're a person of color, finding the correct and right community to be in for that support system that a lot of students of color and first generation students need. I think that's one of the biggest. That was my biggest struggle as I went into college, was finding the right community for me. It's taking like a year, and sadly like the first year was really hard for me. Like I've had a lot of like culture shock, at least for me it was really hard. Like I was missing home a lot, and my mom, her food, like just speaking Spanish overall, like it was something that I extremely missed.
Yeah.
I wanted to share experience, but touch back to what we talked about was like the fear of failing and letting others down. So and this has been like an experience throughout my entire, time I've been here at CU, but specifically, so over the summer I took a course, right? It was a physics class, had to get it out of the way. I am not good at that stuff at all. And it was like the most frustrating summer ever, on top of, like quarantine things. It was just awful. But I remember I was so stressed every day. I would like cry every day. I was like, I'm gonna fail this. This isn't gonna work. And then I was telling my dad about it, and he was like, if you fail it, will you take it again? Like what's the problem? What's gonna happen? And I just like, I was like crying. I was like, no, like I can't fail. I can't afford this. Like it's a lot of money. And he was like, if you got to take it again, like, what are you going to do? You know, it doesn't matter. And I kind of just looked back and I was like, yeah, we have that fear of failure, but in my personal experience, like, my family, it has been very supportive throughout it, and kind of been like, you know, you got to get up. If you fall down, you got to get back up. And that's, I guess in a way that was comforting to me, knowing that I wasn't a like total failure, for failing physics, but I did it in the end, which is good. But yeah, I just, I think that gets in our heads sometimes, and we need to not let it get to our heads, because at the end of the day, you knock yourself down before anything else does. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of sharing an advisor, and anecdotally, sometimes I do resume reviews and job application reviews, and there's a couple of students who, the first time really applying for a professional position, or the first time applying for an internship, and they come to me or Nate, and just like, I didn't get it. I got to know what's next. I'm a failure. It's like, well, you know what? We're kind of glad you didn't get the position, because it's not a good fit, or that there's something that you didn't quite have yet that they need, but there's other options. I think, and that's the important thing. There's always other options when it comes to at least rejection and failure. There's always alternative courses or alternative pathways to get to where you're going. There's not one predefined way, but I think society really tells us that there's a pre-described way of how to be successful and how to do things right in design. And I think the experiences of students in DWB and other university students, it kind of pushes against that. So, absolutely. Let's see here. On a funny note, when I was in the dorms back in the age of dinosaurs, I'm kidding. I think I remember what, like, a first couple of weeks of meeting people, everyone was, so happy to be away from their families, or, this big independent push, that they're doing things on their own, or, at the end of time, I was like, I miss my mama. And I was like unashamed to, first I was, but then I was actually became unashamed to kind of just say, like, like, I'm going to visit my parents on the weekends, or invite my parents, take them out to Boulder with like the few work study dollars I had, because I felt like I was being successful that way. And a lot of people just didn't get it, in terms of that connection and need to have your family there involved in your higher education growth process. So once again, going back to cultural differences there.
I would like to say, just to the overall theme of what this podcast is today, I would say that obviously, like, I failed in the past too, but I feel like I'm really appreciative of like failing in the past, just because it's made me a lot more like open-minded and like seeking different opportunities and just like trying my best at them. So like I feel like I always go in with the mindset of like trying my best and doing my best, and then like if it didn't work out, at least like individually that you tried your best. And this is like also the mindset that I even apply with like studio too. I just make sure that it's the best I could put out, because as long as I do that and it doesn't like end up working out in the end for whatever reason, I'm still not going to be hard on myself, because I know that I did what I could and worked with what I had. So I feel like it also helps create that open-mindedness, and like it helps you like take on new challenges and explore different ways of finding yourself too. And one of the things that I didn't really do before, whenever I would like fail, would be like reflecting. So like finding different ways of like reflecting on those experiences and like some key takeaways and what you learn from them. So I feel like in that aspect, it definitely helps too. But like, I would say that I'm also like not afraid. Like I wouldn't be as afraid of failure as I was like a year ago or so. Like, so I feel like it definitely, I wouldn't say like go and fill out everything you do, but there's definitely a different outlook on what it is and the overall connotation that it primarily has.
I don't know. I guess I guess in a student perspective, do you guys see the growth from, let's say, your first ever pinup in studio? Like, do you feel like you've come a long way from kind of like what Victor said, I'm like no longer feeling that same type of like pressure or that same type of kind of being scared? Do you guys see like a difference at least from the beginning to now?
Oh yeah, I feel like there definitely is a difference. I feel like you just grow a different mindset. So I feel like as long as you're always looking at growing that mindset and improving it, I feel like that's where you could definitely see the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the like kind of narrowing everything we talked about now. Like all those issues are very real and they're hard and they make your life harder. But I think looking past it, like the hope aspect is that it does get better. And they always say it doesn't get easier, but you just get better at doing it. And I think that's very true. Like personally, I remember like my very first pinup, I was like, man, I suck. Like everything else, piled up around me. I was like, oh God, like what am I doing here? And then, even throughout that first year, there was so much change in the way I perceive things, so many different work ethics I learned too, because that matters too. And then that's when you realize, hey, I made it here too. We're here, we're doing the same program. We don't have the same obstacles in front of us, but at the end of the day, we can find a way to do it. And I think that's like what we need to remember, like the hope aspect. You keep pushing towards it instead of just saying, well, this is hard. I don't know what to do. But that's why it's nice to have a community or find a community. And I feel like I found one with a few of you guys here, which is really great because that support is very important. Yeah, I hope the rest of you guys feel that way too.
Absolutely. Flipping the narrative.
Well, I can
For
just
sure.
say, like, over Erica, like you helped me so much last year. I can just say that right now. It was so nice having you there because not only like could I feel like freely to talk to you, like you helped me like with my tech like first class, like my tech doing like the laser cutting. You helped me so much with that, and I think like just having, even if you're just a one person, you were like a big support system for me my first year. Like it was you really did, like you made such a difference. So yeah.
I'm really glad.
I definitely just want to say that I agree with, I guess that quote that you mentioned, Erica, was like, it's not going to get easier. You just become like more tough, I guess. But you also like know how to work your way around certain situations and challenges. So that's the whole aspect of growth.
Fernando put out a question: is do you feel like there is one year in your 4 years or in your current higher education experience that you had that aha moment?
I feel like, especially when I was on campus, I feel like that was me every day. I don't know why. Every day is something.
And every day can be a new revelation. That's it.
And for me, it was like having some faith in myself. Like you can do it. You have to just push through it. It's okay. Like if you fail, like it's okay. Just get back up, do it again, or try something else. Like I think there's never an aha moment because I feel like, at least for me, like I always feel like uncertain of where I am at most times, and so like Just like an aha moment usually comes like at the end where I'm like, I finished through everything. I'm like, see, like it wasn't so bad. You were making it too hard in your head, or like, you know, I don't know.
I think there was a moment of reflection there that you took the time to process. That's important. When people fail or don't do so well, they're quick to put it away. So I think that's part of the process to actually set the reflection time, and instead of avoiding or thinking that it's directly associated with consequences of what failures. Absolutely. I think we're kind of close towards the end. We kind of started transitioning into this, but I just kind of want to end on a more positive note. But kind of in the theme of the podcast episodes is that there's a component of finding hope in a rejection and failure, and we are in a lot of ways switching the narrative of the okayness to reject and fail as a first generation urban students. And being first generation, perhaps our parents, our community might not directly know what it is to fail and the fact that we need to fail at the end of the day. By communicating that out and by reflecting, we're able to find the true growth that happens. And like I said, you're not negatively pointing out failure, but we're also recognizing that some folks are allowed to fail more than often, and if there's a place to fail, it's going to be in higher education, which is the complete antithesis of what an advisor does. But hey, I'm saying it now. All right.
That's great.
Any closing words and thoughts or on that final note? Yeah. Well, in any case, I thought this was a very productive episode. I think we opened up quite doors on a lot of things that students experience. So in my mind, I'm thinking definitely this merits a part 2 or part 3 on this series of dealing with failure, rejection, especially as we go forward through EMVD, currently what we're going through right now. So yeah, definitely has brought a lot of ideas for all of us. And if you're watching this, definitely if you want to have the conversation, join us again. Thank you for all those who got involved, for faculty member or executive board, and all those who are going to watch it. So please join us for our next episode. In case, say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, Al.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey.